Hello everyone, I'm here with Amberley today, and we wanted to discuss another topic of importance for our clients, and that is how to properly rent out your home. So if you find yourself in the situation of becoming a landlord, you want to know how to handle this appropriately. It can be a big step for a lot of people that have never done this before. So it's important to know the process and know how to properly handle it when you're renting out your home, say for the first time or even a consecutive time. Starting off, the first step or the first part of the process is finding a tenant. And this can be done with a few ways. For our clients, anyone that's bought a house with us, we help them through this portion. And there's a few things that go into it. So the first one is doing a market analysis on your home. And that's basically finding out what your home could rent for realistically in your market. It's important to do this because if you price it too high, you could have it sit on the market and sit vacant for a long time, which obviously you don't want. Or if you price it too low, you could be missing out on potential rental income. Basically what we do is the same thing we do when we're selling a home is we look at homes that have homes that have rented in the past 6 months in your immediate neighborhood and that are very similar to yours, similar size, similar condition. And we're gonna look at that and get us a good price per square foot of what we can rent the house out for. So when we're helping our clients, we can do this. Clients can do this too if they have a ballpark, but if you're working with a property manager or real estate agent, it's probably best that they help you with this. That's like basically their expertise and they know the area very well. The second portion is actually listing the home. So when you're working with an agent, we'll put it on the multiple listing service, the MLS, and that should broadcast out to the other online sites, and then it'll also show up to other agents as well. That's really the bulk of our marketing. Most of the marketing comes through online sources. You could also put like a sign out or do print marketing if you want, but the majority of leads for rentals especially come from online marketing now. One of the portions of having good marketing for your rentals is just having great photos. You don't want to have bad listing photos. You want to have, I recommend hiring a professional. Maybe it costs $100 to $200 depending on where you are. And you can actually reuse these photos for future listings. So especially if you plan on keeping your rental, you'll need to relist it probably several times over the course of you owning the property. So it's a really small investment and will get you great payoff because the photos are what people look at the most, and it really gives them a first impression. So once we've marketed the home and we have a few potential applicants, that's when we'll start our application process. And this really goes into what's called screening the tenant. So just because somebody wants to rent your house doesn't necessarily mean you should accept them as a tenant. And there's several things that go into this. What we do, for example, is we have a written application for the state of Texas that they fill out. And this will give us general information, their personal information. They'll list some references. They'll list basically everything that they want in the lease term as far as like how many people live there, if they have pets. And then after that, what we do is we'll collect an application fee. I do $35 per adult. Could be a little more, a little less depending on your area. And this will allow me to do a credit check, a background check, and also screen for any evictions that they've had in the past. This is really critical. You don't want to skip this step even if the person says that they're good to go or they have great rental history. You always want to trust but verify. This is extremely important because you want to make sure you have a good person that's living in your home that's going to pay rent on time and it's not going to damage the property. I feel about 95% of the horror stories that you probably hear from landlords are because they did not properly screen their tenant. And I always say a general rule of thumb is that it's better to wait to find a good tenant than to immediately just accept the first applicant. So once we have a great applicant, they've met all their credit requirements that you've set, they don't have any evictions, and they have a great rental history, that's when we'll go ahead and accept them. We'll collect the security deposit, they'll submit their first month's rent payment, and then we'll basically transition them into moving in the home, getting keys, and getting set up and everything. Amberley's gonna talk to us about what are some of the best practices to utilize once we found a tenant and once they're living in our property.
So once your tenant has moved in, you can expect a handful of things, and there's a few tasks that you need to make sure that you're doing. So first of all, and you're gonna do this before they move in and right whenever you're collecting, your security deposit on their first month's rent, is obviously to have a bank account for this money to go into. You want to have a separate bank account. That way it's not commingled with your own funds. It makes it easier for you to track it. Whenever you go to do your taxes, you'll have it separate for your accountant to handle. It'll make it a lot easier on them. So make sure you do have a separate bank account. Make sure you give that information to your tenant. That way they know what the account number is, what the routing number is, where to find it. And this way they know how to make their payments on time every month for you. In addition to having your bank account set up, you want to make sure that you make yourself accessible to them to answer any questions. This is probably just going to happen the first month or so. Keep in mind they are moving into a brand new house. They're not familiar with it. They're going to have some questions, which is completely normal. Doesn't necessarily mean anything is wrong. They're just getting used to the house and they need a little bit of instruction sometimes. In addition to them living there, they're used to the house. Every once in a while you may get a maintenance call. The best practice to have for this is to already have a handyman or a repairman, somebody kind of off to the side, have their contact readily available. This way you're not scrambling at the last minute. You'll have somebody reliable, you'll know who to go to, and you can get that issue taken care of as soon as possible for your tenant. So over the years of being landlords ourselves, there are a few tips and tricks through trial and error that we've figured out. So a couple of those things, for example, and these are written into your lease a lot of times too. For example, when you do have a repairman or a handyman go out and it's a scheduled day and time, if for some reason your tenant's not at home, they don't allow access to the house, they don't let the handyman come in, you can charge a trip charge for that. We usually do anywhere between $40 and $75. This way it covers you because usually that repairman is going to want a trip fee in turn as well for not being able to go do the job when they were scheduled to do it. In your lease, you do have it written in saying that you can come out and visit the property periodically. We usually like to suggest every 6 months to go take a checkup on the house. A lot of landlords will skip this step just because of the inconvenience, but it really does benefit you as the homeowner to go take a look, make sure that all the rules that you've set forth are being followed. Things such as if you set the home as no smoking or no pets, you want to make sure that those things are being upkept and followed, just because if they're not, that does open the door to you being able to solve them sooner rather than later and having less damage, if any, being caused.
So two main tips that I've learned over the years, and these may seem really small, but you'd be surprised at how much this has helped. One is when you're actually showing the property before you even have it leased, you want to verify about 30 minutes beforehand that the person whose scheduled appointment is actually going to show up. I would say about 65 to 70% of people that schedule appointments to see a rental do not even show up. It's just a very low commitment thing on their part. So you want to make sure that you text them or call them beforehand and make sure that they're actually going to be there at the allotted time, just so you avoid driving across the city and, for nothing. Somebody doesn't even show up. And I also use that as a way to automatically disqualify someone if they want to rent a property. If they can't even show up and don't even have the courtesy to reschedule, then they've just disqualified themselves for renting that property. The second one is actually, along with this trip charge, is it's not only for if they're not there, if the tenant doesn't show up, but it's actually a minimum requirement. So we make sure that we eliminate a lot of the phone calls that we get about changing light bulbs or doing something that's just really, really small that doesn't even cost, say, $50. So we basically tell our tenants in our lease agreement that if you call for something and it costs less than $50, they're going to be responsible for paying a trip fee for that, because we want to avoid doing maintenance or repairs or just these very small little ticky-tack things that the tenant should be responsible for. You just want to train your tenants to not waste your time, basically. So those are some great tips, and these are all tips if you're self-managing your property. If you have a property manager, that sort of creates another dynamic. With a property manager, you just want to make sure that they are doing everything that you want them to be doing as far as renting out the property, they're doing the proper screening, they're implementing any of these little extra tips or tricks that you want to put into your lease agreements. And you really have to manage your property manager. A lot of people think you can just let your property go and let it be completely passive, but that's not necessarily the case. You obviously don't have to do a lot of the other issues like collecting rent or calling on maintenance, things like that. But if you really want to have your property be successful, you just manage your property manager. If you guys need a good recommendation for a property manager here in El Paso, we have a great one in our office. You can reach out to us, we can connect you, or if you need a property manager somewhere else, we can also connect you with them as well. If you have any questions about renting out your property or being a landlord, please feel free to reach out to us. We really believe that these tips and tricks are the difference between success or failure as a landlord. And if you follow these, you should really be set and should save you a lot of frustration. So again, if you like the content, please like and subscribe and reach out to us for any questions.